Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Kato and I'm so glad you're joining me again for another video. Today I'm doing a card based on the MFT Wednesday Sketch Challenge. Although the sketch was for a slimline card, I chose to create a mini slimline today. I am starting out by die cutting two panels from Canson Montval 200 GSM watercolor paper with the Mini Slimline Essentials die set by Pinkfresh Studio. And I'm just quickly sketching on two hills like it showed on the sketch challenge. I'm prepping my card with anti-static powder because I will be embossing all my images. I'm stamping some coins, gold coins from the Party Like a Pirate, My Favorite Things stamp set in Versafine Onyx black ink randomly on the hills I created. By just stamping some images here and there, it creates the idea that the whole hill is made up of gold coins without being overwhelming to the eye. I'm sprinkling on some Wow Superfine clear gloss embossing powder and setting that aside. I'm stamping on the dragon, and I will stamp a treasure chest as well, but I completely forgot to film that. Also in Versafine Onyx black ink on Canson Montval 200 GSM watercolor paper. I embossed that as well and heat set everything at once. I didn't erase the pencil lines completely, but I lightened them up quite a bit so they wouldn't be visible once I painted over them. And I'm quickly painting this dragon's hoard with my Karin Brushmarkers. And I should have used a larger brush to blend this out, but I didn't and it worked out fine. Once my first layer of yellow paint is completely dry, I can add some interest with orange and brown, and I toned those down quite a bit with some water. This shading and tonal variation will do a lot to make this background look interesting. Once I'm happy with how this looks, I will dry this with my heat tool. Be careful because there's already embossing there, so you don't want to remelt that. Now I'm simply taking some of the same colors I used and adding splatter to my panel to add more details. I let the splatter dry while I color in my images. I'm just doing this by putting down some color directly with the marker onto the paper in the spots I want to be the darkest, and then I blend it out with a fine paintbrush and some clean water. When I do this, I'm not using a lot of water. I wet my paintbrush first and then I dab quite a bit of it off on just a regular cloth I have nearby, and then I bring it to the paper. I painted the chest quite roughly because it looks a little more like wood and a little more aged that way. And I'm also shading the gold details with some orange for some more depth. For the dragon, I'm using some really bright colors. And again, I'm working in layers. I really like working in layers for watercolor. You can add more depth to your colors and to your shadows that way. And the biggest tip I have for coloring images like this is to work in sections. I am not adding color to the entire dragon at once. I am just doing the left side first and blending that out. And then I'll move on to the right side, and then the head, and then the wings. Just break the image down in a couple of manageable sections. I always try to keep my first layer really light, which means I can add more contrast with a second and maybe even a third layer if I choose to do so. I'm coloring in the rest of the dragon with some blue, some teal. This contrasts nicely with the pink of the dragon, but also with the gold that we did before. This means we have all the primary colors in one card, and it adds a nice balance to the whole design. I'm adding some extra layers to deepen up the shadows and cleaning up the edges where I colored outside of the lines. For the pink, I'm even using a really rich, deep red to add some extra depth and shading to the whole piece. And I'm simply leaving the horns of the dragon and the little spikes on his back white. I'm not adding shading to them. I think they're too small for that anyway. You could absolutely do that though. One final thing I'm adding to the background is some gold splatter. I could have painted this whole thing in gold, of course, but that wouldn't have added as much depth as I got now. I'm letting this final layer of splatter dry off to the side, and then I'll be doing some ink blending with the Pinkfresh Studio Dye ink. This one is Ocean Breeze, I think. Yes, it's Ocean Breeze. And I'm just blending that onto the panel. I'm making the edges of the panel slightly darker because that gives a nice definition to the whole card. And I'm not being too careful to be for it to be an even blend. With some water droplets, I can reactivate that ink and add some more interest to the sky. Now I'm just figuring out where to place everything, and then it's time to add a sentiment. I'm using a Christmas set for this one. I love these Yetis. They've obviously been used plenty of times before. And I'm just figuring out where to put that sentiment and then stamping it using my Misti. I'm just prepping my cardstock again because I will be embossing. I emboss a lot. I think it gives a really nice finish. Again, I stamped it in Versafine Onyx black ink, and the embossing powder I'm using is Wow Clear Gloss Superfine Embossing Powder. I'm brushing away some of the excess and then heat setting it. Off screen, I cut a couple of pieces that were a 1/4 inch shorter on each side to layer behind my blue panel. I'm putting them together with Barely Art Precision Craft Glue, and this will add dimension to the piece. Everything else I am adhering with foam tape because the pieces are quite small and I don't have the matching dies, so I fussy cut everything out. Now I'm gluing that stack of white cardstock onto the back of my blue panel. And I'm gluing all of that onto my card base. My card base, by the way, Measures 6.5 by 3.5 inch. I really like that for a slimline card. And it leaves a nice white margin around the panel that you can cut with the Pinkfresh Slimline, mini Slimline dies. As a final touch, I figured this dragon's hoard really needed some diamonds, so I'm adding these with a embellishment wand and adhering them with Barely Art's precision craft glue. These little embellishments are for nail art actually, but I'm using them because they are so small. I haven't seen any card embellishments that go to such a small size, and I really like to add just a touch of sparkle sometimes, which they're really useful for. And that finishes up this card. I'm going to tilt it in the light a bit because there is so much sparkle in that hoard. I really like how it turned out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the card. If you want to see more of my videos, please subscribe to my channel. You can also find all the useful links in the description below.